Hello, it's Jack Bannister here, Head of Sixth Form at Waldegrave, with an extended video presentation as a kind of virtual alternative to our usual key information evening at the start of the academic year. As always with these events, I'd like to start by having a look at our Sixth Form vision. So at Waldegrave Sixth Form, our vision is to ensure our students enjoy a love of learning, achieve their aspirations, and feel empowered to become the leaders of and contributors to a better society. This vision very much underpins all of our planning and decision making on a day-to-day basis on the sixth form, from the events that we run, the way that we try to interact with students, to the lessons we plan, amongst many other things. And equally, it's the vision that we ask students to keep in their minds and use to influence their own behaviour as they approach their studies. So by this point in the sixth form process, hopefully you should be able to see this vision sort of being realised in your daughters and your sons, and in particular in year 13. I think that element about achieving aspirations and feeling empowered are really, really key. We know that students in year 13 will have already, for the last few months, been looking in some detail at their post-18 options, whether that's university, apprenticeships or employment, and will be working very hard to make sure that they're able to submit competitive applications for whichever of those routes that they want to take. And of course, we know that in a few short months, our students in year 13 will be leaving us and stepping out into the world. And we hope that they feel confident to do that and are able to make a really positive contribution to their community. So that's the vision. We have an excellent sixth form team who help us to work towards achieving that vision. And there has been some changes to it for this academic year. So as always, Ms. Tung, the head teacher, is very much involved in the sixth form and helping to set the strategic direction for things. I am the head of sixth form, and that's not sort of an intangible responsibility. It's very much something that I'm involved with on a day-to-day basis. My office is right by the door to the sixth form. I teach lots of A-level lessons myself. I'm very much accessible to students and involved in what's going on here. And in the same way, I'm very much accessible to you as parents if you want to speak to me as well. We have two fantastic heads of year in the sixth form. For your daughters and sons, Miss Pugh is the head of year. She had them through the course of year 12, so has been able to establish positive relationships with lots of the students. And the fact that she will remain in that position provides a continuity of care as we move into year 13. There are also specialist teams of year 12 and 13 form tutors. So all of your daughters and sons will see their form tutor every single day. And where possible, we have kept the form tutor the same as the person they got to know last year. One of the areas where we've had a slight change is in our academic mentors. So we are very fortunate to have had Mrs. Gonzalez with us for a little while now, but we're also joined by Mrs. Ruggles-Ross as our second academic mentor, and they will be working in tandem to provide students with bespoke support outside of lessons, particularly where they might be struggling academically. Many of you over the course of the year will have communication with our exams officer, Mrs. Denbury. Of course, we know examinations are an important part of the year 13 experience. And then we have our fantastic admin team of student support officers, led very ably by Mrs. Everard, the sixth form manager, and she's supported in those duties by Mrs. Ridgely, Mrs. Allen, and Mrs. Askham. So they work on our sixth form reception desk. If you phone through to the sixth form or you receive an email from the sixth form at email address, it will be one of them that you are communicating with. They're very much available to students to give them support as well, to answer questions. They play a really important role in our tracking of attendance, behaviour, punctuality, and reporting those things back to parents. And they also organise many of our activities and events as well throughout the year. So they are a really important part of our team. Our careers advice this year is being provided by a company called Innovate. So Innovate is not a person, it's a company, and we have essentially outsourced our careers advice and guidance appointments to them. So if your daughter or son would like a careers advice and guidance appointment, you can let me or their head of year know, and we will be able to organise one through Innovate. They come into school and they use only careers advisors qualified to either degree or master's level. So they're able to provide a really, really good experience for our young people. And then finally, our inclusion department is led by our Senko, Miss Salisbury. So if there's any issues around special education needs, they can go through her as well. So alongside the subject teachers, that's really the core sort of team who are helping the sixth form to run smoothly. One of the things that you will be aware of from our consultation last year is that the timings of the school day have changed for this year. So tutor time is now in the morning from 8:35 to 8:55 rather than the afternoon. And all students are expected to be in for that tutor time. So they need to be sat down in their tutor room by 8:35. So really they need to be aiming to arrive on the school site a little bit before that. All of the lessons throughout the day are then an hour long, and we've left travel time of 5 minutes between them to help students avoid being late. We still have our break at roughly the same time as before, from 11:05 till 11:25. And we have extended lunch as well, so that students are able to take a more meaningful break during the course of their day. The school day ends at 3:15. From Monday to Thursday, although of course sixth form students don't have lessons in every period, so they are actually welcome to leave as soon as their last lesson of the day is complete. Friday is a slightly different day for the majority of year groups in the school, where it will be finishing at the slightly earlier time of 2:10. For year 13, that doesn't apply, and we do still have one more lesson, period 5 on a Friday, taking place from 2:15 to 3:15. And the reason for that is that students in the sixth form have been, or this year group of year 13s in the sixth form have had 4 lessons per subject per week last year. And this year, we would normally give them 5 lessons per subject per week. And the only way that we've been able to timetable in that extra lesson for each subject is to use that Friday period 5 slot. So there will be some students who've got that late lesson on a Friday as well. So those are the timings. In terms of the lessons, now we're in a 2-week timetable where we have week A and week B. It's probably easier to think of lessons in terms of how many you have per fortnight rather than per week. So it's 10 lessons per subject each fortnight. Where possible, we've tried to divide them equally across week A and week B. But in some subjects, there might be incidents where there's sort of extra lessons in one week compared to the other. In all of our lessons, we endeavour to provide high quality teaching, varied styles of learning. We have specialist staff who are experts in the subject that they are teaching. We try to be engaging and interactive, conduct regular assessment and feedback. And of course, we support all our learning here through Google Classroom. So students have got their school Gmail accounts. They're all parts of Google Classrooms. They have their Google Drive and so on to help them. What we ask of students in terms of making the most of lessons is really to arrive on time, to bring the right stationery and equipment with them, to adhere to the seating plan, so they sit where the teacher asks them to make sure they're listening carefully to instructions when others are talking, be proactive at taking notes, try their best, contribute to discussions, ask for help when needed, treat their teachers and peers with respect, keep themselves organised, take note of homework tasks, and meet deadlines. So those are very much the basics, but it's our firm belief that actually success is built on these solid foundations of getting the kind of simple things right on a regular basis. So we would really ask that you sort of encourage those standards as well when you're discussing lessons with your daughters and sons. The other sort of major component to the school day alongside the lessons is the tutor time. So that's happening in the morning every day. It is compulsory for students to attend tutor time. It's not optional. They must be there. It's really important in terms of pastoral care because it means there's a consistent adult who's interacting with students on a day-to-day basis, able to notice when things go wrong, answer questions they might have. But we also have a really good program of tutor time activities with a different focus for each day of the week. And essentially, it's trying to strike a balance between equipping students with the sorts of knowledge that they might need to go out and be successful in the world. So, for example, this year we cover things like managing finance, living independently, and how sort of criminal justice works in the UK, whilst also giving them the chance to engage in critical discussion and debate with their peers around important issues as well. So the tutor time is a really important compulsory element of the day. The kind of third kind of component that you will see on the timetable are work periods. So students will have about 13 work periods per fortnight on their timetable if they're taking 3 A levels. Of course, they'll have slightly fewer if they're taking a 4th A level. We intentionally refer to these as work periods rather than free periods because students really need to be using the time productively to engage in independent learning. This year, we think we've made that even easier for students to achieve because we've constructed a new silent study area. It's wonderful, clean, new, freshly decorated. It's staffed, so it's completely silent, and that's sort of ensured by staff for most of the day. And it's got seating for about 90 people in there as well. So it very rarely is getting crowded, and that's really helped to relieve congestion in the study base as well. So we hope that by making those changes, students are able to use their work periods very effectively. One of the key things that we emphasize to students all the time is the importance of independent learning. So the lessons, of course, are key in the A-level process, but students need to be doing as much work outside of lessons as they are doing inside the lessons. So we would suggest that for each subject, students engage in 5 hours of independent learning per week. That might include the set directed homework tasks they are given, but it really should extend beyond that and include work that they are undertaking using their own initiative. This is the framework that we have given to students to identify those independent learning tasks. So we really encourage them to prepare for lessons, perhaps by reading ahead to the next topic from a revision guide or a textbook. If teachers are posting resources in advance, kind of going through them, having a look at what's coming up, making sure that they go to the lessons with that foundation of knowledge or any questions they might have ready. Equally, we would encourage students to consolidate after their lessons, so finish off incomplete tasks from class, read back through their notes, add additional detail, highlight the key information that they've written down, and so on. We would also encourage students to practice what they have learnt in class by doing practice exam questions. So many teachers will give students lists and lists of past exam questions, and the more of those that students can try to write answers to or plan answers to, if they're more extended questions, the better. And finally, we encourage students to revise as they go. And for us, it's a really big misconception that many students have that revision has to take place right at the end of the learning process. And we hear all the time students say, there's no point revising now because I won't remember it. But I think that really sort of misrepresents how the process of revision works. And really, you want to be constantly revising so that you're building layer upon layer of knowledge, so that by the time you get to your final revision at the end, where you're really committing it to memory, you've already built up a really good basis of understanding from your previous efforts. So we would encourage students to be writing revision notes, as they go along through the course, so that they're not backloading all of that work. So any support that you can give as parents in trying to emphasize that and encourage your daughters and sons to do their independent learning, the better. And one of the ways that you can do that is by trying to establish a really good home learning environment in your house. Of course, people have very different setups at home, and space may be more limited in some households than the other. But where possible, if you can provide things like folders, stationery, electronic devices, a good internet connection at home, those things are all really helpful. And perhaps most importantly of all, we would really encourage you to practice what we would call zoning, whereby there is a separate work area in the home to the sleep area. So for some people are in the position where they have enough space to use a completely different room, and you might get your daughter or son to be working at the dining table or in a home office rather than in their bedroom. If that's not possible, at least having a desk in the bedroom as well as the bed is really helpful. We find that when students sit in their actual bed where they sleep to work, that they either fall asleep and the work doesn't get done, or that they start to associate that bed not as a place of rest, but with the idea of work and the stress and anxiety that comes with it. And that can have quite a destructive impact on emotional well-being. So a really good home learning environment is important. We do allow students to bring their own electronic devices to school, but we would ask that they're sensible with them. We don't take responsibility for them going missing or becoming damaged while they're here. Students have to look after them themselves. There are lots of plug sockets around for them to charge things up. And we're really, it's really important that we encourage students to remember that they, even if it's their device, they are using our network, our internet connection. And so they must make sure that the websites they're visiting are appropriate for a school setting. So that really takes you through the different components of life in the sixth form on a day-to-day basis, from the lessons to the tutor time, the work periods, the home learning. What I'm going to do over the next few slides is talk you through some of the support systems that we have in place to help students when things go slightly awry with those day-to-day activities, starting with overtime. Overtime is a mechanism we have for detaining students after school to complete work that is outstanding, that hasn't been done. There are two types. The study support overtime is by far the most common, and it's intended as a supportive measure to sort of encourage students to get more work done. And then we have the supervised alternative, which is a little bit more structured and formal, and is really more of a sanction when students have persistently not done the right thing. So students might be put into study support overtime if they've missed a homework deadline, or they haven't worked very hard in class, or they're not getting enough independent work done. We aren't seeing the evidence of that. So it's very much to do with kind of deficiencies in their approach to their studies. The supervised overtime is where that behaviour has escalated and become either more serious in terms of an individual incident. So the study support overtime takes place on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. Students will be told by their teacher if they're in that overtime, and they will be directed as to what tasks they need to prioritise completing. If they are in study support overtime, they need to go to sixth form reception and sign in at the end of their last afternoon lesson. They're then able to go and work wherever they like in the sixth form building, get on with the tasks set by their teacher, and after 2 hours they can come and sign out. So effectively, they're not being supervised in that overtime. They're just being made to stay at school for an extra 2 hours to get something done. The supervised overtime is more formal. That is supervised. It's in room 001 in the sixth form. They have to stay there throughout the supervised overtime in silence, and that runs from 3:30 till 5:30. Okay, so it's a little bit more inconvenient for students. The vast majority of individuals probably won't end up in overtime in the whole time that they're here in the sixth form, but for some they will be more regular visitors, and we would ask that you're really supportive if students are put into overtime, in kind of emphasising that it's important they engage with that process and attend. It's all about getting them to complete tasks that haven't been done. We also have a really good cycle of assessment and monitoring here in the sixth form, and that includes sending lots of information home to you as parents so that you can keep an eye on the situation. So our first set of mocks are going to be in November this year. We will brief students on those in more detail imminently, and that will just be a 1 week mock window, and typically students will have one paper per subject there. After that, we will send home a progress report with predicted grades and the raw mock exam results, and there'll be support meetings for those students where they're not quite on track. Our parents' evening is due to take place in January of this year, and then we have another set of mocks in February, right at the end of February, which will stretch over 2 weeks. So they will be a little bit more onerous, and then at the beginning of March, we will send home a progress report again with those mock exam results with predicted grades, and there'll be a further round of support meetings. Excuse me. And then the final A-level exams, the actual public examinations, take place from the middle of May onwards and throughout most of June as well. So it's quite a hectic schedule of assessment and monitoring this year. We get students to do quite a lot of mock exams. We know they can be very stressful, but the reality is we do have those public exams coming up in the summer. They are inherently challenging, and they are immovable. We don't set the timing of those public exams. So what we want to do is give students lots of experience through mocks so that they're used to the exam environment. They found ways of coping with the pressure of revising effectively, and they're almost a little bit desensitized to it. And that's why we do so much mock examination. I mentioned there that there will be the opportunity for support meetings where students, through the progress reports that are sent home, appear not to quite be on track. If students are sort of receiving a prediction that's, just 1 grade below target, or there's a problem in just one subject, then the subject teacher is likely to deal with that in terms of putting in place interventions, although they would be very happy to speak to you as well. We tend to get involved as a pastoral team in the sixth form in the cases where students are 2 or more grades below their target in multiple subjects. And in those situations, it would suggest there's a more serious issue at play, and we would typically organise a meeting with either the head of year or myself as head of sixth form, the student, and then yourselves as parents, and we would gather together as a team to kind of work out what's gone wrong, what's gone right, and put in place a plan to ensure that we're able to move forward together. Students typically don't love these support meetings. No one likes going in and having to sit and discuss how they're getting on with their parents and their teachers. But from our perspective, they are meant to be supportive, and it's all about us working together collaboratively towards a shared goal of your daughters and sons achieving as much success as possible this year. I mentioned earlier that we have two fantastic academic mentors, Mrs. Ruggles and Mrs. Gonzalez. Already, many of your daughters and sons will be seeing them for academic mentoring. But if they're not, and you think they should be, or your daughters or sons decide for themselves that they're struggling, they're welcome to pop in and see Mrs. Ruggles or Mrs. Gonzalez at any time. And they can provide small group workshops, one-to-one support, weekly mentoring sessions, more casual drop-in support, and they can really help with all manner of issues from writing to time management, organisation, general skills development, communication with teachers, revision skills, and so on. So they're a really useful resource here to us in the sixth form. If your daughter or son has any special education needs, that needs to be supported by all of us, but the lead on that support would come from our inclusion department, led by our Senko, Miss Salisbury. And that's particularly the case where students have an EHCP. But if there are other kind of lower level special education needs that we're sort of not aware of, or where you don't think the support is in place as it should be, then please do get in touch with us, and the inclusion department will be able to support there. We also appreciate that many families might be facing financial hardship, especially with the current sort of media coverage of around energy prices and so on. And the good news is that we do have our 16 to 19 bursary funds to provide some level of financial support where it's needed. So vulnerable students who are young carers or are in receipt of sort of universal credit and other sort of benefits like that are entitled to the bursary. But we also have a discretionary side to the bursary where it's sort of within the sort of power of the school to determine whether or not to grant it. And that gives us a little bit more flexibility than other funding streams like the pupil premium and free school meals. So if you think that you might be in need of that bursary support, I would encourage you to get in contact with Mrs. East, our finance officer, or your daughter or son can go and visit Mrs. East themselves when they're in school to discuss it further. Moving on then from those support systems to some of the kind of expectations, rules and procedures we have in the sixth form, and starting with attendance. Attendance really is absolutely vital. It's only possible for us to help students, to support them, and to promote their learning if they are here on our site attending school. So we do expect students to attend school every day, Monday to Friday during term time. They must arrive punctually for tutor time at 8:35 in the morning, and they must then go to both tutor time and all of their timetabled lessons. Outside of that, when they have work periods, they are allowed to either leave the site or go home. Where a student is going to be absent, and that's known in advance, it's a planned absence, perhaps for a university visit or something like that, we ask that a parent or carer emails the sixth form at the earliest possible opportunity with those details so that we can log it in our registers and ensure that teachers are aware. If it's an unplanned absence, typically due to illness, again, we ask that a parent or carer contacts the school either by phone or email to report that absence by 8:30 in the morning. And again, that allows us to ensure that the registers are accurate and that teachers have been briefed. So following those attendance processes is really important. And when they're not followed, it creates a huge amount of admin work for our team here in the sixth form to kind of follow up and work out where the student has been. Students themselves are generally very good at attending school, but we do sometimes hear some kind of erroneous excuses and certain things that are not valid reasons for missing school can be seen here. So we don't allow students time off for family holidays. The school holidays are very long, particularly this summer. Year 13 students will be on holiday, for all of July really as well. We don't allow students time off to go to interviews for part-time jobs or training for part-time jobs. School has to take the priority, certainly not for social events and driving lessons. We appreciate that medical appointments, it's not always within your power to decide the timing of them, but where you do control the booking, we ask again that those are avoided when there's lessons. The more challenging thing comes around illness and tiredness and things like that. And clearly, if a student's contagious or they're very, very ill or they have a devastating injury, we would expect them to take some time out of school and we would support them as best we can. But where there's a minor cold or something like that, especially as we go into winter, we would really encourage students to persevere with getting into school. And equally, the same is true with tiredness. I think there's a very significant difference between true sort of exhaustion where a rest might be needed and just a little bit of tiredness because they've gone to bed late the night before, or they're not used to getting up, so early in the morning after a long summer holiday. And in those situations, we really need to get students back into routine and encourage them to get into school and prioritize their learning, rather than sort of allowing them time off, which creates a little bit of a vicious cycle where they never end up back in that position where they're able to get up and get into school on time. So attendance, absolutely vital. Where a student misses a timetabled lesson or a tutor time and that hasn't been reported to us, and the right procedures haven't been followed, we would consider that truancy. It's an unexplained, unauthorized absence. And we do track that, and we will be running truancy detentions on Mondays after school. Students will be told that they're in that detention on the Friday of morning tutor time, and we will expect them to go to that. And that is a sanction, it is a punishment, and it's really in recognition of how important the lessons are to the outcomes that students will get at the end of this year. By the same token, punctuality is vital. We do keep track of that, and we do have a sort of stepped procedure that I will show you in a moment for addressing persistent lateness. Often students have sort of in their minds justifications for being late. These are some of the greatest hits, none of which are actually acceptable excuses. So students shouldn't be arriving late to lessons because they're printing homework. They've got lots of work periods to do that. They shouldn't be arriving late because they're getting a coffee or they're getting food from the cafe. Again, there's lots of time for them to do that. They shouldn't be late because they're waiting for a friend. They need to walk to the lesson themselves and not be held back by others. They shouldn't be sort of confused about the timings. I know we've had a change of timetable, but it's been a couple of weeks now, and so they should be getting used to that and making sure that they are arriving to places on time. There's lots of things students can do to increase their chances of being on time, especially to school in the morning. And I'd say cutting out non-essential tasks in the morning is really key with that. So, packing the bag the night before, deciding the outfit for the next day the night before, not sort of doing elaborate things with hair and makeup in the morning. All of these are simple steps that will help with that. This is our steps procedure around punctuality. So this is based very much on the AM registration, the tutor time in the morning. So where students are repeatedly late, you'll see that we escalate our actions, and that will involve at a certain stage informing you as parents as well, so that action can be addressed both from the school but also at home as well. I've already mentioned that Year 13 students do have the freedom outside of tutor time and their timetabled lessons to leave the school site and sort of either go home early at the end of their last lesson or pop out and then come back. We call that a freedom pass, that privilege, and it's important that it is conceptualized as a privilege. And if students are persistently late or their attendance inexplicably falls below a certain level, or they're truanting a lot of lessons, we will revoke that freedom and detain them on the school site throughout the day. Behaviour generally is very good in the sixth form. However, we do have penalty points, which are sanctions issued in the event that behaviour isn't appropriate. The most common reasons for penalty points would be not wearing lanyards, sort of being disruptive sometimes in lessons or a little bit rude, perhaps to staff, and of course truancy from lessons. And again, we have a stepped procedure there that escalates our response and involves parents as well. One of our key rules in the sixth form is that they wear their lanyards, and I'm sure if you ask your daughters and sons, they will say that we've been having a real push on the lanyards over the first few weeks of this term, and that will continue. All students have been given a lanyard with an ID badge, and they need to wear it around their neck every single moment that they are on the school site, from the second they walk through the gate in the morning until the moment that they leave later on in the day. Because our sixth form students are not in uniform, the only way that our staff have of identifying them and knowing that they have the right to be on our site is through the lanyard. Of course, lots of the staff would know them, sort of just recognize them visually, but there are lots of staff in the school who don't teach the sixth form, don't teach A level, and there are many occasions where sixth form students might be required to walk through the main school, and so it's essential they have the lanyards on in those moments in particular, so that we're able to identify intruders or people who aren't meant to be there. And this is a really important part of our safeguarding procedures, remembering that we have much younger students on the site as well as our sixth formers. So the lanyards are absolutely vital, and we would appreciate your support in emphasising that. Sixth form students are allowed to use mobile phones, but they must never be visible to the students in the lower school. So we ask that our Year 13s are sensible with that and think about their setting when they're using their phone. Of course, we have our dress code. It's not incredibly strict. The goals of it are really to make sure that students are sort of dressed in a way that is suitable for the task that they're undertaking and that strikes the balance between giving them a sense of individuality, but also remembering that clothing choices are situational. You know, we would never dress the same to go to a party as we would to go to the beach, as we would to go to work. And we need to remember that applies for students as well. And we are in a school with people of all different ages, backgrounds and beliefs. And that for staff, it is a professional setting, we're at work. And so clothing just needs to reflect that as well. Okay, so here's some of the do's and don'ts. One of the key things about Year 13 is the university application process, which we started quite a long time ago in Year 12. So at this point, students should have registered for UCAS long ago and linked their application to the school. And then they should have gone on to complete as many sections of the application as possible. The education qualifications section should be done. And students should have started to make their course and university choices, although they might not have reached all of their final decisions yet. There are lots of resources posted on the Careers and Progression Classroom, which all students are part of, showing them how to go about doing these things. Miss Pugh, the head of year, is chasing up a small number who have not yet registered for UCAS, and if they don't get that done promptly, Miss Pugh may be getting in touch to ask for your support in making that happen. In terms of the course and university choices, there are 5 that can go on the UCAS application. I would say that students probably should have a clearer idea by this point of their sort of top 1 or 2 choices, but they may still be trying to work out their kind of 3rd, 4th and 5th choices. The important thing is they're taking practical steps to make those decisions, whether it's speaking to staff, friends, family, going to open days, taster days at universities, or conducting online research. They need to be proactive in moving themselves closer to their final decisions. Personal statements should have already been drafted at least once and submitted to form tutors prior to the summer for feedback. Tutors should then have given that feedback, and really students should now be implementing it and working through 2nd, 3rd drafts. Typically, students will do 5 to 6 drafts before they reach the finished sort of version of their personal statement. And in addition to showing them to their form tutors, I would also advise that they show them to a subject teacher in a related area to what they're applying for at university. And of course, myself and Miss Pugh, the head of year, are very happy to look at them as well. Again, resources were posted on the Careers and Progression Classroom last year to help students with that process, and a kind of a live briefing on it was given as well in the summer term. UCAS predicted grades are always one of the sort of areas of application that cause a lot of sort of nerves and so on. We are intending to release the UCAS predicted grades on Friday, the 16th of September, so imminently, really, this Friday. Students have been asked to refrain from sort of hassling staff about them in advance of that moment. We want to release them in a kind of structured way. We certainly value the effort students have put into their A-levels and want them to be able to submit competitive UCAS applications. And so giving them good predicted grades is part of that process. At the same time, our predictions have to be rooted in some kind of objective data. We can't base our predictions on intangible things like how much we might believe in an individual or not, because that's very prone to sort of discrimination. And we want to make sure students are treated fairly in the sense that they are being treated consistently. And we also have to make sure that we're maintaining the credibility and accuracy of our predictions in the eyes of the universities. So our process in terms of balancing those competing concerns is we take the ALPS target grades that students were given at the start of Year 12, we take their mock exam results from the end of Year 12, and the final set of predicted grades that went home on their progress reports from last year, and we give them whichever is highest out of those 3 pieces of data for their UCAS prediction. Now, that's a lot more generous than many of the other local schools and colleges where they would not factor in target grades and they would work purely off exam results, okay? So our system is relatively generous compared to some of our sort of competitors nearby. There will be a process outlined to students when the predicted grades are released for how they can sort of question or ask for a review of that information, and we would ask that they stick to that process. So we won't be taking sort of meetings and phone calls with parents in the first instance to discuss those grades. We will expect students to go through the standard process, and then if it needs to escalate from there will be that option. What we do also emphasize is that any discussions around this must be mature, calm, and respectful as well. In terms of deadlines for UCAS, if a student's doing an early entry application, the deadline is the 15th of October. That will apply to all Oxford and Cambridge entries, as well as anyone applying for medicine, dentistry, or veterinary science at any university. They have to be sent by 6 o'clock on the 15th, but students themselves need to pay and press send before that, because when students press send, the application simply comes to the school, and we then need time to check it for mistakes, enter the predicted grades, and attach the reference before we press send again for it to go to the universities. So if a student sends their application at sort of 5:59 on the 15th, it's not going to get processed by the school in time for the deadline. So really, those early entry ones, we need them on the 14th of October at the latest, if not a little bit before. And then the main UCAS deadline for all other applications is the 26th of January next year, in fact, 2023, that should say. But we would encourage students to get them done before that. So kind of just after half term is a kind of good point to aim for in terms of getting the UCAS application done. And the benefit of sending it early is that universities start giving out offers as soon as they receive applications. So they typically have more offers to give out at the beginning. And we find sometimes they're a little bit more prompt and generous with their offers when you send the application off early. And it also helps students to sort of get it out of the way and be able to just focus on their studies rather than worrying about the UCAS application. There are a small number of students who may have to undertake an admissions test or an entry exam. That typically applies to students who want to study law, medicine, dentistry, or a wide variety of courses at Oxford and Cambridge. Most of these admissions tests may be sat at school, although there are some exceptions. We have to be very clear that it's the responsibility of students to inform the school if they want to be registered for an admissions test with us. We have no way of knowing whether or not they should be doing an admissions test. The student themselves needs to research that and alert us to that fact. We have sent out a Google form as a letter to parents, and we've also shared it with students through a recent assembly relaunching the UCAS process. And if students want to do an admissions test with us, they need to fill in that Google form by the 23rd of September. There are registration deadlines for admissions tests, and if they are missed, the universities have a zero tolerance policy on allowing late registration. So it is really important that students identify if they need to do an admissions test and let us know by filling in that Google form ASAP. So that's the UCAS process. Sort of the final thing really to discuss is emotional well-being. And you may have seen all of these emotions already during the sixth form process, from tiredness to anxiety to sadness to euphoria to anger. And that's a normal part of being a young person. The important thing is how students respond to those feelings, whether they acknowledge them, whether they reach out for help when they're becoming destructive. And that's really what we're here for, is to help with that process of managing emotional well-being. So there's a number of factors that come up for sixth form students that can have a negative impact on emotional well-being, from financial difficulties to doubts around sexuality to problems with relationships with their peers, either romantic or as friends, illnesses, bereavement, all of these kind of things, and of course, managing workload. So these are all factors which can stress our young people, particularly in year 13, that we need to be alert to as both teachers and as parents. There are a number of people students can go to if they are struggling with their emotional well-being. Their form tutor is really the first port of call, but then they also have their head of year, myself as the head of sixth form, and there are a number of other professionals in school we can get to help them, from the nurse to mentors to the school counsellors. And I've put in a couple of key phone numbers there for other support services that can help in the event of a crisis as well. Lastly, I think it's really important we think of year 13 as a transition year. So students are transitioning from year 12, the sort of exciting start of sixth form, to their final year of sixth form, their exam year. And they're also looking ahead to the transition that will be coming when they go to university. And all of that can be quite unsettling. So I think it's important for us to be cognizant of both the challenges and the opportunities. In terms of the challenges, I think especially at the start of term, getting back into a sensible routine after a long holiday can be difficult. Students can be quite phased by making these big decisions about their future and what they're going to do next year. We know the marketplace in terms of university is very competitive. And we also know that these students have got, really limited experience of examinations, especially formal examinations, and that might be difficult for them as well. So it's important to acknowledge those challenges and find ways of managing them, dealing with them. But I think we can also put a positive spin on things and look at the opportunities here as well. So I think our Year 13 students understand what's kind of expected of them at A-levels. They know how hard the work is, and so they can make sure that they're working in a way to meet those challenges. A lot of them are very excited about making their university applications and kind of taking that step into the future and sort of entering a version of adult life, if you like. Lots of them have made great friends in sixth form, built positive relationships with staff, and I also think when they've done that application, whether it's to university or an apprenticeship, having something really clear as a goal or an objective to work towards can be quite motivating as well. So both challenges and opportunities over the course of the next few months. Okay, so just tying together some of the kind of key messages for you as parents from this talk in terms of how you can support us. Really useful to us if you read all correspondence from the school carefully and respond where appropriate. Always communicate with us using the sixth form at waldegravesch.org email address, and we will sort of triage the communication and send it on to the appropriate person. Help your daughters and sons to be organised by supplying stationery, encouraging them to engage in their independent learning, and establishing good routines in a working environment at home. Affirm and support the dress code. Communicate with us in advance about planned absences or on the day as early as possible where they're unplanned. I would say to maintain some boundaries with regards to parties and socialising. Of course, at this age, students will have a bit more freedom and they will be sort of having a more active social life and perhaps to an extent experimenting with things. But I think it's important to remember that you're still in charge as the parents and that we need to keep them, safe. So have some boundaries there. Promote healthy sleeping habits as best as you can at home. Ensure that part-time jobs are not adversely affecting their studies. And of course, support the PTA as much as you can because they do make a real difference to the school through the money that they raise. So that's really all from me today. If you do have any queries, please get in touch via the sixth form at waldegravesch.org email address and reference the desired recipient in the subject heading. And that would certainly apply if you have questions off the back of this talk. Either myself or Miss Pugh, the head of year, will be very happy to arrange a phone call or a meeting with you. But otherwise, I hope that's been useful and answered all of your questions, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you very much.